YouTube, this is Barrett from RProgrammingTutorials.com, and today we're going to be looking at variables in R. So what's a variable? Well, a variable is basically just a bin in which we store some value. So to start out, let's create a variable x and let's store within it the value 5. So to do that, we say x equals 5. So now we've created a variable x, we've stored in it the value 5, and we're going to check that we actually stored that value 5 in the variable x. We're going to type in x, we're going to press enter, and we see that the value of 5 was successfully stored in x. So there is a second method to store a value in a variable, and that is with what I call the arrow method. So we say y equals 4. So with this method, you'll notice that the arrow points towards the variable. You can think of it as the value of the value that you're storing within the variable is being pushed into the variable. So 4 is being pushed into y. So y is storing 4. So now we check y and we see that it equals 4. So now we have two variables, x, which is 5, y, which is 4. We can perform some basic arithmetic operations with them. We can do 2 times x, which is 10, because 2 times 5 is 10. We can do 3 times y, which is 12, because 3 times 4 is 12. We could do 4 times x plus 5 times y, which is 40. And you can get that value by substituting in the value of x and the value of y, and you'll get back 40. So we can perform any arithmetic operation that we want with these variables, and all R is doing is just plugging in the values to the variables. So if you go back to the previous lesson on arithmetic, you can pretty much replicate anything you want from that lesson, and you can use variables to do that. Now, let's cap this lesson off with some simple housekeeping that we're going to do with the variables. So what I mean by housekeeping is we've defined two variables, but what if we wanted to delete a variable? What if we wanted to see what variables we've defined because we've been working for an hour and we've created a ton of variables, but we don't know what we've defined? You know, some of these problems can be solved with a few simple functions. So the first function I'm going to tell you about is the ls function, which I believe stands for list. So ls parentheses, and then you press equals, and you get x and y. That is because we have defined x, which is 5, and y, which is 4. Now what ls is doing is it's telling us what variables are defined in our global environment. Now our global environment is like the top level environment in which we're defining variables. Anything that gets defined in R during an R session is going to be in the global environment unless it gets defined in some function that we create, or it gets defined at a lower level than what we're defining here. But you don't need to worry about that. Basically what you need to know is you can type in ls and it's going to tell you what variables are defined that you've defined so far. So right now we have x and y. Now what if we want to delete x? We can use what's called the rm function. Rm, we put in x, press enter. Now we list out our variables in our global environment and we get just y. That's because we've removed x. Rm stands for remove. So we've removed x. Now we no longer have x and y, we just have y. We can also remove y. Remove y. List out all of our variables, and we get character 0, which just basically means that we have no variables in our global environment. Now let's recreate some variables. So we'll say x equals 7, y equals 9, and z, we'll use the arrow method, equals, let's say 9 again. Okay, so now if we list out our variables, we have x, y, and z. What if we want to delete all of our variables? We do that using the remove function. We say remove, and then we say list equals ls. Now, before I press enter, let's think about what this is doing. We're removing, and then we're using the list argument, which means we're removing a list of variables, and then we're setting it equal to ls. Now, what does ls do? Ls lists out all the variables in your environment. So if you're removing an entire list, okay, and the list you're removing is equal to the entire list of all variables in your global environment, then you're going to remove all of them. So we do that, and then we list out our variables, and we have none. So right now, if we type in x, we get an error. The object x is not found because it was removed. We type in y, we get an error. We type in z, we get an error. So at this point, just to recap, you've learned the two methods of creating variables: the equals method. You've learned the arrow method, which, by the way, is preferred by a lot of people. Some people goes, even as far as saying that the arrow method is the technical R way to do things. It's the technical syntax. You can use either method, and I switch between the two. And you've also learned how to perform arithmetic with variables, and you've learned some house cleaning functions. You've learned the ls function, which lists all your variables. You've learned the remove function, so you can delete variables, and you've learned how to remove all of the variables at once. So that concludes this tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. It's a definite ego boost because everyone wants subscribers if you're on YouTube, and it'd make my day. So do it, and that way you can get all the videos that I release, you get updated on those. Go to RProgrammingTutorials.com. It's a great site. It's going to have articles, an ebook with practice problems and solutions. Go check it out. It's all meant to go hand in hand with these tutorials.